pretty serious drug addiction at the time. You know, my best friend passed away. Like, there was a lot of things that were going on, and I think at that time my world was kind of just like spiraling.
He emerged from Detroit's darkness to reign as a lyrical titan, a man who turned suffering into symphonies. But beneath the spotlight brewed a storm no one anticipated. Addiction, grief, and brushes with death would shatter everything he built. This is the hidden sorrow of Eminem, the glory and the collapse. The unraveling of Marshall Mathers. When the Eminem Show dropped in 2002, he had it all: wealth, fame, family, and the crown of hip-hop royalty. On the surface, he was unstoppable. Inside, something fragile was splintering. The constant grind had drained him. Fame boxed him in, and what began as restless nights spiraled into a desperate fight for his life. Eminem would later admit his dependency started subtly. A few pills to calm his mind, a few more to quiet the chaos. Before long, it was Ambien, Valium, Vicodin, anything that offered silence or sleep. What began as a harmless aid for insomnia evolved into full-scale dependency. Rolling Stone reported that Eminem confessed to taking up to 80 Valium pills in a single day. When his supply ran out, he turned to methadone, a substitute meant for heroin withdrawal, until one night in 2007, it nearly killed him. He was just hours from dying. According to Rolling Stone's 2010 piece, the spiral started long before the public caught on. By 2005, during his Anger Management 3 tour with 50 Cent, his body was breaking down fast. That August, he abruptly cancelled 10 European shows, citing exhaustion. The truth surfaced later. He had quietly checked into rehab for sleeping pill addiction, confirmed by Billboard in 2005. Fans speculated wildly. Was he retiring? Burned out? The truth was darker. He was slipping toward death.
It was sleeping pills, right?
Yeah. Well, sleeping pills like Valium, Ambien, stuff like that, but also, I mean, Vicodin.
Eminem's later revelations exposed the twisted logic of addiction. At first it was NyQuil, he recalled. Then NyQuil stopped working, so I needed something stronger. The progression was typical, but the scale was catastrophic. Addiction runs in my family a little bit, he admitted. His uncle Ronnie, the man who first introduced him to rap, had taken his own life years earlier, a wound that never healed. By the time he entered rehab in 2005, Marshall was a ghost, numb, detached, and lost in denial. He stayed only 2 weeks before checking out, convinced he didn't have an addiction, just a sleep problem.
So, I think I stayed in rehab for maybe a total of 2 weeks, you know, and checked myself out. And I think I was convinced at that time, like, I'm not an addict.
What came next was tragic but inevitable. Eminem relapsed almost instantly. He told himself he had control, but addiction doesn't bargain. Soon, methadone had him chained, a synthetic opioid that would nearly end his life. By late 2007, his body surrendered. He collapsed on his bathroom floor after an overdose that nearly claimed him. Doctors later said he was just hours from not waking up. Between 2005 and 2009, his career flatlined. No shows, no interviews, no music. Fans waited in confusion, unaware he was fighting for his soul. Eminem would later describe those lost years as a blur of pills and self-hate. Days melted together in isolation and withdrawal. I wasn't fun, he admitted. Maybe to others I was, but inside, I was miserable, moody, broken, and full of self-pity.
What were you like to be around when all this was happening?
I wasn't fun. I was real moody, real kind of self-loathing.
Then in 2006, the unthinkable happened. Proof, Eminem's closest friend and D12 brother, was shot and killed outside a Detroit nightclub. For Marshall, that was the breaking point. Proof wasn't just his stage partner, he was his anchor, the one who stood beside him from basement battles to global stages. Losing him wasn't just heartbreak, it was losing his last link to sanity, his final piece of home.
At that moment, it just seemed like my world was ending.
Right.
You know, that whole time period was the darkest place that I ever went into in my life.
Proof's death pushed Eminem further into the abyss. He ramped up his substance use, trying to silence the guilt and heartbreak. In later interviews, he admitted he blamed himself. What if I had called him that night? What if I had been there? Those thoughts haunted him relentlessly. He confessed, I had to learn to let it go. Nothing I say will bring him back. From then on, his world contracted into isolation. Public appearances vanished. Rumors swirled in tabloids. Some assumed he had retired, while others whispered of another stint in rehab. The reality was far more fragile. Eminem was fighting to survive. Meanwhile, legal battles mounted. Promoters of his cancelled European tour sued for millions in lost revenue, forcing him to testify in 2007. MTV News reported that although his finances remained solid, they were strained, not from bankruptcy, but from being broken. Every day, Detroit, his hometown, and the stages that once felt like home seemed increasingly distant. When he finally returned, fans noticed a stark change. He had shed weight, his energy had shifted, and for the first time, the world saw not Slim Shady, the fearless entertainer, but Marshall Mathers, the man behind the persona. He revealed that during those years, he focused on producing for other artists rather than creating his own music. "I knew I needed a break," he said. "I wanted to work with talent from my label and just step back." But that break morphed into exile, a struggle with rehab, relapse, and grief. When applause fades, even legends face the void. For Marshall, that silence was crushing and lethal. The man who once owned stadiums with rapid-fire rhymes now fought for survival in quiet rooms surrounded by pill bottles instead of fans. By 2005, at his peak, Eminem's empire was unraveling. He was living proof that fame could both illuminate a life and destroy it.
I knew that I needed to take a break. I knew I wanted to take a break, and I knew I needed to take a break from the spotlight. I was going through a pretty serious drug addiction at the time.
By that point, he had released 4 consecutive platinum albums: the Slim Shady LP, the Marshall Mathers LP, the Eminem Show, and Encore. His alter ego had made him a global icon and a lightning rod for controversy. But the higher he rose, the heavier the pressure became. Fame made him wealthy but trapped him in his own mind. He began self-medicating, first to sleep, then to cope, and finally just to survive. Rolling Stone reported that he was taking 60 to 80 pills daily: Valium, Ambien, Vicodin, a lethal mix for most people. His insomnia had morphed into dependency, veiled by denial. Initially, it was NyQuil, then stronger medications as the first no longer sufficed. In August 2005, during his Anger Management 3 tour, the cracks widened. He cancelled all 10 European shows, citing exhaustion and medical issues. Public statements were polite, careful, and vague. Behind the curtain, however, lay the harsh truth. He had entered rehab for a sleeping pill addiction. Billboard confirmed that the cancellations were a desperate call for help. Even in rehab, he struggled to confront his reality, checking out after barely 2 weeks, still convinced he wasn't truly an addict. He refused to believe he needed help. He convinced himself he could manage it, that a simple sleep clinic would fix his insomnia and he could return to work. But addiction never negotiates. It only takes. The moment he left the clinic, he fell back into old habits: Vicodin, Ambien, Methadone. The pills that once dulled his pain now ruled his existence. By 2006, another blow struck. Proof, his closest friend and D12 bandmate, was killed. The two were inseparable, more brothers than collaborators. Proof had supported him from Detroit basement battles to stardom, pushing him when no one else believed. Proof's death outside a Detroit nightclub fractured Eminem completely. He sank deeper into substance abuse. Pills became his sole refuge, his only escape. He blamed himself. "If I had talked to him that night, maybe he wouldn't have gone to that club," he admitted later. But nothing he said could reverse the loss. Guilt consumed him as those closest to him watched helplessly. Eminem withdrew entirely. No performances, no writing, no studio sessions. His world shrank to the walls of his Detroit mansion, surrounded by wealth yet suffocating in solitude. Even his daughters barely recognized him. Friends and label executives tried to intervene, but Marshall resisted. The same fierce drive that had made him a lyrical force now fed his destruction. He isolated further, sinking into depression and dependency. Then came 2007, the near-fatal overdose. The Guardian reported that he collapsed at home after taking methadone, a drug so potent that tiny doses can be deadly. Rushed to the hospital unconscious, doctors told him he was hours from death. He survived, but the warning was unmistakable: the next overdose could be fatal. He later recalled waking in the hospital, shaking and ashamed, staring at the sterile ceiling, attached to tubes, a moment of reckoning. It was no longer about his career. It was about his survival. In reflection, he admitted that the scariest part wasn't almost dying. It was not caring if he did. The pills had numbed him to life itself. Afterward, his family and team intervened once more. This time, he listened. He returned to rehab for real, with guidance from an unexpected ally. Elton John, the legendary British musician and recovering addict, became his mentor and accountability partner. Years later, Elton revealed they would speak weekly to keep Eminem on track. "I love him," Elton said. "He's one of the most brilliant lyricists of our time, and I'm so proud of how far he's come." With Elton's support and a renewed commitment to fatherhood, Eminem began rebuilding. But recovery wasn't glamorous. Sobriety left him raw. Anxiety, insomnia, and emotional fragility returned in full force. Performing sober felt frightening, but the same stubbornness that almost destroyed him became his survival tool. By 2008, Marshall Mathers was clean, yet changed. He was quieter, slower to smile, reflective, marked by someone who had seen too much darkness to pretend otherwise. Rehab had dismantled his ego, but restored his humanity. He began writing again, not as Slim Shady, not as a shock rapper, but as a man confronting himself. These sessions laid the groundwork for Relapse, 2009, and Recovery, 2010, albums chronicling his fall and redemption. The lyrics weren't bravado, they were a promise to his fans and himself. His return was measured but intentional. Performing sober for the first time in years, he rediscovered adrenaline without chemical support. Anxiety lingered, though. In interviews, he admitted that being on stage without substances felt raw and exposed. BBC Radio 1, 2013, quoted him saying, "I used alcohol to deal with stage anxiety. When I got clean, I had to relearn performing," he reflected. The irony wasn't lost on him. A world that once celebrated his pain now seemed unsure how to embrace his happiness. That was Eminem's paradox, a genius born from trauma, whose recovery threatened the very chaos that fueled his creativity. Yet sobriety gave him what fame never could: peace. He devoted more time to his daughters, Haley, Elena, and Whitney, prioritizing family over headlines. Those closest to him described him as calmer, introspective, even humorous. The anger that once propelled Slim Shady softened into gratitude. By 2010, Recovery became one of the year's biggest albums, selling over 5 million copies and earning a Grammy for Best Rap Album, Billboard, 2010. But the true triumph wasn't awards, it was survival. Eminem had outlasted his demons. He admitted in interviews that sobriety isn't a one-time victory, it's an ongoing fight. It's not like, okay, you did rehab and now you're fine, he said. It's something you battle every single day. His openness inspired millions, particularly those grappling with addiction. Reddit forums and fan communities were filled with recovering addicts crediting his story for their perseverance. Reddit, 2010 present. Yet healing didn't erase the scars. The shadows remained. Proof's death lingered. Fame still pressed heavily, even re-emerging stronger, a subtle melancholy threaded through his interviews, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to vanishing. Years later, he would recount the 2007 overdose with clinical detachment, not as a victim, but as a survivor, analyzing his own near-death. That authenticity is why Relapse and Recovery resonated so deeply. They were more than albums. They were confessions set to rhythm, guides for climbing out of personal graves. Elton John's mentorship had been pivotal. Eminem's resilience wasn't just remarkable, it was miraculous. To overdose, relapse, lose a friend, and still reclaim creative excellence required more than skill. It demanded an unyielding will to live when everything inside him had surrendered. By the release of the Marshall Mathers LP2 in 2013, critics noted a new maturity. His venom remained, but a sober clarity underpinned his lyrics. Eminem wasn't just rapping, he was testifying. He spoke openly about addiction cycles, cautioning others to avoid compromise. No alcohol, no substances. By 2025, he had maintained 17 years of sobriety, extraordinary for someone who once consumed 80 pills a day, Eminem's X posts, 2023. Perhaps the most striking element of his story is how tragedy became testimony. Every lyric since Recovery carries humility, a recognition that survival doesn't erase pain, it reshapes it. In a world where countless artists succumb to addiction, from Kurt Cobain to Mac Miller, Eminem is a stark reminder of what might have been lost. His journey isn't just cautionary, it's proof that even on the brink of annihilation, redemption is possible. Today, he lives quietly in Detroit, focusing on Shady Records and family. Public appearances are rare, and when he speaks, it's not with Slim Shady's bravado, but with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed both extremes of fame. The tragedy isn't simply the fall, it's that darkness was necessary to illuminate the light. From that shadow emerged rebirth. The pills are gone. Chaos has faded. What remains is a man refusing to be defined by his demons. As he once told a Detroit crowd, a quiet smile on his face, resurrection, sobriety, recovery, redemption. 4 years, Marshall Mathers was trapped in cycles of chaos. Pills, sleepless nights, guilt, that nearly claimed everything. Yet from the depths of despair came the unexpected, true resurrection. Leaving rehab in 2008, Eminem was not the same man who had entered. His bravado had faded, his voice softened, and his focus honed. Humility now guided him, the kind only earned by facing death and surviving. He no longer aspired to be Eminem the superstar, he wanted to be Marshall Mathers, the man. After the overdose, he endured months of detox and therapy, confronting the physical torment of withdrawal and the emotional unraveling that followed. He later described it as being reborn without a manual. Everything had to be reconstructed: relationships, career, even his ability to rap, his greatest gift, felt diminished. He started small: morning runs, journaling, quiet moments with his daughters. Structure replaced pills. Consistency replaced chaos. When he returned to music, he did so cautiously, unsure if the world was ready for him. It was during these delicate months that relapse began to emerge. The 2009 album wasn't aimed at commercial triumph, it was therapeutic. Every beat was a confession, every verse an exorcism. Relapse was dark, unsettling, and brutally honest, filled with twisted tales and self-referential horror reflecting his fractured psyche. Critics were divided, but those who grasped addiction recognized it as cathartic genius. Eminem later admitted he needed to make the album to purge the toxins from his life. Rolling Stone, 2010. The following year, Recovery would complete the transformation. Gone were the murderous alter egos and shock rap theatrics. In their place stood an artist confronting reality with clarity. Recovery wasn't just a return, it was reclamation. The album sold over 5.7 million copies globally and won the Grammy for Best Rap Album in 2011, Billboard, 2011. Beyond accolades, it was the honesty that struck listeners. Rage gave way to reflection, chaos yielded to clarity. Yet even in this renewed life, Eminem wrestled with the shadow of his former self. He later told Complex that sobriety could feel isolating, as he no longer recognized many people around him. Some weren't there for the right reasons, he said. Sobriety shows you that. This awareness reshaped his art. Lyrics became sharper, more technical, yet deeply introspective. He traded killing pop stars for slaying his own insecurities. When the Marshall Mathers LP2 arrived in 2013, it was both sequel and reckoning, revisiting his past through a sober lens. Tracks like Bad Guy reflected on earlier work, as if he were facing his younger self in a mirror. On Headlights, he even extended an apology to his mother, Debbie Mathers, closing decades of public conflict. Critics praised the LP2 as a technical triumph, intricate rhyme schemes, precise delivery, and heightened wordplay. The New York Times observed that sobriety had sharpened his focus, likening his flow to a surgeon's precision. But Recovery brought exposure as well as strength. Eminem openly acknowledged that the battle wasn't over. In interviews, he admitted, "There are still days I feel I could fall back, but I remind myself of what it cost me the first time." That vigilance became his new obsession, staying alive. Sobriety restored his artistry, but more importantly, it restored his role as a father. During his addiction, he had been a ghost in his daughters' lives, present physically, absent emotionally. Now, he made rebuilding those bonds his priority. Haley, in particular, became a source of pride and grounding. When asked what he valued most, Eminem didn't cite Grammys or sales. He said, "I'm proud of Haley. She's doing great." These moments shaped the tone of his later music, vulnerability replacing aggression, growth replacing rage. By the mid-2010s, Eminem had cemented his place not only as a rapper, but as a survivor in a notoriously unforgiving industry. His sobriety became a beacon, demonstrating that recovery is strength, not weakness. The Guardian, 2017, noted that his comeback inspired a new generation of artists to openly confront mental health challenges. His journey also reflected a cultural shift in hip-hop, where openness and vulnerability began to signal authenticity. Artists like Logic, NF, and Macklemore have credited Eminem's honesty as a guiding influence in discussing addiction and depression. Even with fame restored and demons subdued, Eminem's tragedy remained woven into every verse. His genius had emerged from suffering, and his redemption still carried the echoes of pain. Free, but forever marked. When Revival dropped in 2017, reviews were mixed. Critics called it political, raw, uneven. But for Eminem, it wasn't about appeasing anyone. It was about truth. 2 years later, Kamikaze, 2018, silenced skeptics. It was aggressive, unapologetic, and lyrically formidable. He addressed doubters directly, proving that sobriety hadn't dulled his edge, it had sharpened it. In an interview with Sway Calloway, he said, "When I rap now, I do it because I love it again. I don't have to prove anything, but I still can." By Music to Be Murdered By, 2020, he blended introspection with intensity, exploring loss, addiction, and mortality from the perspective of someone who had survived both fame and near death. The Guardian described the album as a man conversing with his own shadow. Despite ongoing critical acclaim and chart-topping releases, Eminem has largely retreated from public life. Award shows, interviews, and media appearances are rare. Detroit remains his sanctuary, the place where he is simply Marshall. "I don't need the world's validation anymore," he said. "I got my peace." For a man who once chased chaos, peace had become the ultimate reward. What makes Eminem's journey truly heart-rending isn't only the suffering he endured. It's how much of himself he had to lose to reclaim his soul. He traded sanity for success, health for fame, and friendships for art. Yet ultimately, he discovered a form of redemption that few ever experience. Not through record sales, but through recovery. In 2025, Eminem stands as a cultural icon, one of the most skilled lyricists in history, but also one of the most profoundly human. His music continues to evolve, and his influence reaches beyond charts and awards. Quietly, his foundation supports addiction programs in Detroit, and he often leverages his platform to raise awareness about substance abuse, though rarely publicly. Each year on the anniversary of his sobriety, he shares the same understated message. No hashtags, no proclamations, just a simple post, a photo, a silent acknowledgement, still standing. It's almost poetic that a man once defined by chaos and anger found grace not in noise, but in silence. His tragedy became triumph. His addiction, awakening. And the same verses that once mapped destruction now underscore survival. In the end, Eminem's greatest ordeal wasn't death, it was transformation. From the ashes of Slim Shady, Marshall Mathers emerged reborn. Sober, scarred, but stronger than ever. Thanks for watching. Be sure to explore the other cards on the